It's 113, I believe, right? Oh, back at it again. It's the State of Football Part 113 edition here on this Wednesday, January 6, 2021. I am RIC in the place to be, Ric Serritella, telling it like it is when it comes to the NFL draft and everything football. Your new home for real football talk in the mornings right here on the State of Football, broadcasting at the headquarters here at the Jersey Shore around the universe with my co-host each and every day, John Murphy, down in New Orleans. Of course, VP of player personnel for the Toronto Argonauts. And also joining us today, just to follow up, we had him on a couple weeks ago, the legendary Coach Keith Grabowski. Make sure you follow him on Twitter, especially if you're a coach. We got a special treat for you with all the great things that he's doing. Of course, the Lawrence First and Goal Foundation and some heavy hitters. The big names just keep rolling out there. So we'll get into that. Of course, later on, we'll have some fun with all-decade teams. We got the Bengals, Falcons, and Texans on deck for that. Oh, by the way, the Texans with the new GM, Patriots South down here in Houston. We'll discuss that and more. Plus, Devonta Smith, first wide receiver since Desmond Howard, 1991, to win the Heisman Trophy Award. First Alabama player since 2015. Shout out to our super producer, Samantha, behind the scenes for pointing that out to me prior to the show. But let's get into it. Let's dive right in. Good morning, fellas. How are you today? And we'll get right into this upcoming event that we are just loving, Coach, what you've put together, Lawrence First and Goal Foundation Virtual Coaches Clinic, January 14th through the 17th. Make sure you sign up for this if you're a coach, if you want to learn more about coaching, lfgfcoachesclinic.com. And Coach, good morning. We had you on a couple weeks ago, and the lineup then was star-studded. Since then, you've added some more big names. Who do you got that you can announce here this morning?
Well, and there's a few more surprises here up our sleeve with some people we've been talking to. But, just going through the headliners again, you got Mac Brown from North Carolina, Luke Fickell, James Franklin, who is a longtime part of the camp, is now in as a keynote speaker. Jeff Monken, of course, Dan Quinn, Greg Schiano. And then, what was interesting, we're putting this stuff out there and, John Luce gets a message from Jeff Collins at Georgia Tech saying, hey, how do I get in? How do I be a part of this? And that's what we've seen. Like at this point right now with our 160, we've got about 30 slots we have not announced yet that are coming up. But unfortunately, we've had to turn away coaches who want to volunteer their time and be a part of this. And, we're looking for other opportunities to get those guys involved in the future, certainly. But I know recent additions, we got Tim Lukabu from defensive coordinator from Boston College, Jay Bateman from North Carolina, defensive coordinator, Brent Dearman from Kansas, Mike Elko, defensive coordinator, Texas A&M, Kyle Flood, of course, who now is the offensive coordinator at Texas and offensive line coach, Adam Fuller, Florida State, Justin Hamilton, Virginia Tech, Jim Knowles, Oklahoma State, DC, Scotty Montgomery, Maryland, Joe Moorhead, Oregon, Matt Mummy, OC, Nevada, Dave Patnow, OC, Georgia Tech, Brian Polian from Notre Dame. Brian was awesome, man. Brian went into the sign-up, not only signed up for one time, he took 2 slots to speak about special teams and then to speak about culture. And, he's always done an excellent job. Brent Pry, defensive coordinator at Penn State, Victor Santa Cruz, defensive coordinator, Hawaii. We've got Brennan Marion, receivers coach, and the creator of the Go-Go offense from Hawaii, going to be a part of it. Nick Sheridan, OC, Indiana. Rich Scrosky. How much time do we have, guys? Holy cow, this list just goes on.
People are signing up as we're going through the list. I hear them registered.
Rich Scrosky, Florida International. We got Bob Wiley. Bob Wiley's topic is, I think the most interesting one because I just don't know what exactly is going to come out of it. But his title is Things That You Should Know. And, we know Bob. Bob, when it comes to football and offensive line play, that guy knows everything. An incredible lineup of special teams coordinators, every position. When I go through, you could just look at the lineup for one position and you put it out there and say, oh, they're having a defensive line clinic. That's what this is. But no, it's every position, 160 speakers, guys who are donating their time. I think what's unique about this clinic is those guys, don't get a speaker fee. They're doing this on their own. They're donating their time, and in the video, later will be on CoachTube as well, to continue to bring in funds for Lawrence First and Goal Foundation, for pediatric brain tumor research, and probably the most important part of it, the cancer services. And, that's not something that's a pass through for the foundation. They take that money and they directly help families out who, need to travel somewhere to get treatment for their child, et cetera. It's just, again, an incredible cause. And we're really looking forward to this one. It's lfgf.coachesclinic.com. And, Rick, you'll have to have me back on following this, because we've got an incredible lineup of clinics after this. New York, Pennsylvania, the Lone Star Clinic in Texas, just to name a few. We've got about a dozen of these happening. I'll actually be doing one through March through June, a state champions clinic, sponsored by the Coaching Coordinator podcast, where we'll be talking to not just state champion head coaches, but their staffs, and really getting deep dives. An ongoing clinic rather than a few day event, something that coaches could be a part of. But just blown away by the response to this. And really, there's a ton of clinics out there. There's even a lot of free ones. But I would encourage any coach out there to, number one, get here, because you're going to learn a ton. But this clinic fee essentially goes to helping an incredible cause.
Oh, this is outstanding, Coach, what you've put together. Lawrence First and Goal Foundation, the Coaches Clinic, January 14th through the 17th. LFGF, coachesclinic.com. And quite honestly, not only are you supporting a great cause, that's the best thing about it, but also, like, if you're involved in football in any capacity, and we have front office folks, we've got coaches at every level, we've got college administrators, like, if you don't sign up your coaching staff for this event, you're not doing your job, right? Because everybody's looking for an edge when it comes to football. And I know one staff that'll be logged on are the Toronto Argonauts right here, John Murphy and his staff, because this is an invaluable thing you're doing and you're giving back. And that's what we love here on the State of Football.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, when you read that, you read the initial story of how it started. And then, what we've mentioned a couple times, Coach doesn't give himself enough credit, for what's come out of that. I mean, raising nearly $3 million, that's been donated. I mean, you just got to look at, forget about if the only person they had was a coach that went 0-11 this year and was talking about what he didn't do right, it would be worth signing up for the bigger message that they're creating. And when you see the list of names, right, there's probably a lot of really hard things that Coach has to do. Number one, come on here and make us look bad. But, it's not hard to make those phone calls, right? And now when you hear that the outbound calls to ask people if they want to be on it is now being almost probably equally met by inbound calls of saying, how can I get involved? Right. Yeah. And I think that's the part of it that you see. And it's something that we know in the football culture. If one person is doing something and it's for a great cause, it's usually, something very easy for people to jump on board with. And I think that the list of names just shows you how much people have seen the energy and passion that Coach, you and the originators that, created this, seeing that there was a lost opportunity, right? You couldn't do the camp, can't do things live. You hit the ground running with an idea of doing something virtually. This has to have exceeded even your expectations.
Absolutely. And, I got to give a credit to the incredible team at Lawrence First and Goal, Marianne and John Luce. First of all, I don't think there's anybody who's going to say no to them. They are incredible people. John's got his season going on, and any free minute that he found, was put towards reaching out to coaches and helping put this together. Chad Walker, who I had the opportunity to coach against when he was at Kenyon College and now is a high school coach in Florida, has been a big part of this, as well as his wife, Victoria. And, it has been a team effort of a lot of people and people not even mentioned here behind the scenes, helping put this together, helping organize. It's not easy to organize, a 4-day event with 6 speakers at a time, trying to fit everybody into a slot. getting all their information, getting their clinic topics. But I can say, as these guys have gone through and signed up for their topics, they're here to deliver to the coach, right? It's not that they just wanted to be a part of this. They understand that, they have an opportunity here to help the profession and help an incredible cause. I'm really excited about it. To me, the best value, obviously, get your staff. The individual right now is $79. The staff pass is $300 for five. Get five coaches together. Even if they're not on your staff and they want to attend this, and it's $60. But the other part of it, I would look at getting it. If I got the staff pass, I'd probably sign up for at least one of the $199 year-long access to this, so that my guys could get back on and review this at any time. You think, go spread that out over a year. I mean, it is really cheap for what you're doing. A little bit more than $12 a month to or $15 a month to really improve your program and keep that learning going year round. And just an exciting opportunity. And as I said, this isn't the only one we've done. We know there's a lot of state associations out there who are hurting for their events as well. And, you think about state high school football associations run by high school coaches. There's, not run by business people. They rely on their event to have their coaches come in and pay their membership fees. And a lot of them give out scholarships. They have charitable causes. There's things they do just to raise the level of their game, their all-star games, et cetera. So much that everybody has missed out on because of this shutdown. And, for me, I'm just excited to be able to provide that opportunity and be a part of, that team, our team at coachesclinic.com and CoachTube, who's able to offer this to coaches and put it together. And I got to give a shout out to my man, Ed Passano, in North Carolina there, who's done a great job with the state association side of this, just helping us line those guys up. And, for us, it's all about the relationships too. We're really excited to be able to help that. And, one unique thing about everything we're doing, whether it's the Lawrence First and Goal side or it's the state association side, is, we're not CoachTube is not a production company. We are just a technology platform that monetizes the coach. So we don't own any of this content. The associations own it. The coaches who come on this individually and do some stuff own it. And just, to me, that's the way this should be done, right? You should be incentivized to be able to share your knowledge. And there's no reason, there was a time where I think a lot of people led us to believe, oh, just give it out for free. But then you turn around and somebody's making money on the back end of your intellectual property. And that's what I like about, everything we're doing with CoachTube. And just right now, an incredible organization. I'm excited about the growth. We're working with you guys at NFL Draft Bible to put out Baldy's breakdowns, the seminars. Wow. You talk about a wealth of information. We've got 4 of them live now. We have the offensive line seminar with Bob Wiley. If you are an offensive line coach or want to learn about offensive line play, how to break it down, how to look at it, I highly recommend that one. We have the wide receiver clinic, which was a breakdown of Devontae Adams, Randy Moss, and Michael Thomas. Then we had the line of scrimmage seminar. We had the tight ends and fullback seminar. We have the defensive line seminar coming, and the edge rusher. Wow, the edge rusher one. I sat in that one live. Just incredible. So we're excited about the relationship with you guys too and what we have to offer. And again, you can go find those at coachtube.com, and we'll make sure that we tweet some of those out towards you guys too, so that coaches or anybody here can go get those links and learn some ball.
Yeah, we've been sharing that out on the Twitterverse at NFL Draft Bible, of course, at Coach K Grabowski, at CoachTube. Make sure you check out CoachTube.com, not just for the Baldy Breakdown seminars, for all their great content. I mean, it's just a wealth of information. And then, oh, by the way, if you're around tonight, you can still sign up. We do have 2 more live seminars for the Baldy Breakdowns, breaking down corners tonight. You can log on NFLDraftBible.com for that one. That's tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern. He will break down Stephon Gilmore, Darrelle Revis, and, oh, by the way, Charles Woodson, who was nominated or not nominated. He advances to the semifinalist for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, who I believe is a lock. I think he's a lock to get in. So that's tonight. And of course, these will all eventually be syndicated on CoachTube.com. You heard Coach mention you can sign up now at CoachTube.com. Of course, the Lawrence First and Goal Coaches Clinic, LFGFCoachesClinic.com. Make sure you support a great cause. And we can't forget to mention CoachingCoordinator.com, all the great podcasts, the virtual magazine, Coach, you got going on. What else is cooking? You always got some new stuff percolating. What
I just started, and I got to say it is definitely inspired by you guys and how you're breaking things down. But I started an off-season R&D series. So right now, offense R&D series, and we're taking a look at every single position and the strengths that you have. What's the ideal guy look like? And I get a lot of this from some of the work you guys do. What's the ideal guy look like? In reality, very few of us have those. So as you start to take the skill set and the strength of that particular guy, and look first at the interior offensive line, centers and guards. If these are my guys, for example, if I have physical, powerful guys who can explode their hips, what's the best thing for me to run, right? So not only just looking at the traits of what makes that guy, but if I have these kinds of guys, what schemes fit best for me? And so over the course of the series, we're going to break that down and really help coaches focus in and evolve their offense, help them to avoid the situation where they're trying to fit a square peg in a round hole, and what will optimally be the offensive schemes and concepts they should run. We have so many resources at CoachTube that we're just saying, hey, if these are your guys, here's the best schemes for you to develop your base run game. And so, we look at both the optimal guy and guys who have, maybe not, every piece, but have something to offer and build around their strengths. I'm excited about the series. Again, that first one is up actually this morning at coachingcoordinator.com on our blogs. And an email went out to all of our users as well. And, a lot of free videos in there that come directly from CoachTube, ones that coaches have turned on for free. So I know I started out with a great one in that series, just talking about the theory is inside zone, right? One of the schemes I felt went along with this particular skill set we were talking about today. And who better to explain that than Jim McNally, right? The guru of offensive line play. So I'm excited about the series. I think it's going to be something that helps coaches along through this offseason. And, every position we're doing, of course, we'll extend it to the defense as well as we go through this offseason.
Yeah, outstanding stuff. We love it all. Anything else, John, you got for Coach here before we wrap things up?
Yeah, you see all the changes, that have been coming. Is there anything that stuck out to you? Maybe, a hire that you've seen so far, or a name that you're seeing associated, potentially to be a coordinator or jump into a head coaching job that maybe, from an audience standpoint, they don't know all these guys' names until they get there, right? No one knew who Clark Lee was. Suddenly everybody knows who Clark Lee is. Now, is there somebody on your radar that you've heard speak or you've interacted with that you're saying, wow, that guy with that opportunity, could be really interesting?
Yeah, I think you start to see a lot of those. And John, I think we are, and I was talking, I forget to who the other day about this, an FBS coach, but there's going to be moves made that really start the carousel moving. There's going to be a lot of opportunities. It's been exciting so far to see, a lot of these guys I've had on my show. So one right off the bat, Scotty Walden, who moved from interim at Southern Miss to Austin Peay. And then he hired a guy who I think is just an incredible coach. I think eventually he'll be a household name, but his name is Chris Kappas. He was the defensive coordinator at Mount Union, went from being the DC there. The next year moved into the OC role. He was the Football Scoop DC Coach of the Year, or Coordinator of the Year, Division III. And then the next year he was up for it again as the offensive guy. I mean, he's just an incredible coach. Been blown away every time I had him on the podcast. Now he's at the FCS level. I don't think Scotty Walden or Chris are done yet as far as their climb here. So those are two, I think, dark horses to watch, right? Names that aren't household right now that you're going to see, I think, again and again. I think they're going to do a great job at Austin Peay. Really excited for Will Hall making the move from offensive coordinator at Tulane to Southern Miss. He brought along Cody Kennedy with him. Those guys got a guy by the name of Dante Bartee who was a GA at Cal, and he's been a coordinator at the small college level before. You talk about a guy who can just flat out teach the game, Dante Barty. That's going to be a name too. So I'm not naming maybe some of those guys who are in those coordinator roles. There's some guys who were just doing analyst jobs and stuff like that I think you're going to see rise to the top. And I'm sure when we hang up, I'm going to think of a bunch more. But those guys came to the top of my mind when you asked that question.
Well, always great stuff here, Coach. We appreciate you hopping on. And again, Lawrence First and Goal Foundation, January 14th through the 17th. 1 week from today would be the 13th. Can we book you in again the day before? Pump it one last time. So let's lock that in, Coach. We'll catch you next week, and always appreciate the time.
All right. Great seeing you guys again, and appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Coach Keith Grabowski, the legendary, the one and only. Man, he's doing big things. So hats off to him there at Coach K. Grabowski. And again, LFGF, coachesclinic.com. Hey, man, the sun is changing over here at the Jersey Shore. The sun rises up. The sunroom is blinding me. What's going on? Samantha, do we have any coffee? I need some refills over here. By the way, my guy Jordan, if he's listening, John over at LeGrand Coffee House, we may have a coffee sponsor on our hands. We may have a coffee sponsor on our hands. The LeGrand Coffee House. And I didn't even know. I just came across it. Eric LeGrand, of course, Rutgers alumni, and another guy giving back, suffering a tragic injury and still working his way back to being able to walk again. But Eric LeGrand now has a coffee shop, LeGrand Coffee House. They have their own coffee brewing company. So, hey, John, if you're listening, I know we're going to have a call later. Send it over, because that's all we do here on the State of Football. Talk football, drink coffee. Late night, you might get something else. I was watching it, it was a good night last night. I had Big Law on 7 City Shop Talk, who, oh, by the way, we keep teasing this big announcement. If you listened to 7 City Shop Talk last night, you may have heard some breaking news. You may have heard some breaking news by Big Law there. And then you had the two rodeo clowns, David and Ryan, over on the Mav Sports Take, talking football. But, I got the invite one time. They said, when are you coming on the show? When are you coming on the show? We'd love to have you. And then they had me on. They didn't realize I was coming on as the analyst, not as the host. I gave my opinions. Too much gas for the party. Too much gasoline for that fire. They haven't invited me back yet. I'm invited back tomorrow, though, here on the State of Football, weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern.
Yeah, they can't meet my requirements. Too many requests that I have to be a guest. Green M&Ms only.
Well, John from LeGrand Coffee House, we work for coffee, so hey, we'll definitely plug you. And you're based in Jersey, and it's giving back to a good cause. So stay tuned. Reach out to Eric LeGrand Coffee House on Twitter or Facebook or wherever you may be listening, and let them know we're talking about you. We're talking about you here on the State of Football. Let's talk
in a good way. In a good way.
Yes. Let's talk about some moving and shaking at the NFL level. Chan Gailey just resigned from offensive coordinator there in Miami. And, of course, yesterday the news coming down the wire, we mentioned it at the top of the show, Patriot South, Nick Cesario, the next GM there in Houston. Thoughts and impressions?
Oh, well, Chan Gailey could have turned in that resignation anytime during the 4 quarters of the game against the Bills. So, sorry, Shan, but that performance probably left everybody kind of scratching their head. I think kind of interesting dilemma there where he either is announcing his resignation or they would have been probably announcing it for him. And at the same exact time, Chris Greer and Brian Flores double down and say, "Two is our guy." Now, they said Josh Rosen was there. Josh Rosen was a guy, and that's a whole other story from last offseason when Josh Rosen heard he was the guy until he wasn't. But I think this time that it's legitimate. I think they will be very, very active, and it will not be surprising if they strike quick. I think that's why, probably they had a real conversation, with Chan Gailey, and I think that was something that would have been known, at that moment that, like, hey, they drafted Tua. They clearly thought what they thought of him when they drafted him. That's why they stuck with him. That's why they knew, like, this was the right thing to do. That was the first time he had played in any kind of weather conditions like that. So you got to play in it.
Coming off of multiple injuries, this talk about moving on from such a small body of work. I mean, how short is our patience getting now in this?
Yeah. Again, though, you look at it, whether it's at the collegiate or the NFL level, when you're hearing about going to Jacksonville with all those picks, the problem is, are they going to let it mature enough to see what has happened, right? You don't grade a draft for 3 to 5 years, but yet you're going to grade, a coach or GM in a hurry, right? So, I think that was a smart move by Miami yesterday. And like I said, it'll be very interesting to see. Do they look at somebody at the collegiate level that can run an offense similar to what would make Tua successful? Is there an NFL guy they want to jump on? And now you have that roster and you have the young players and you're right in the mix, and you're coaching with Brian Flores, who's hugely respected, but also known for running a tight ship, but not a unfun, not a work environment you don't want to be a part of. And also the people around it, Chris Greer, Anthony Hunt, you have what you need there in the front office and the coaching staff to make that team be a contender for years to come. The offense was clearly what did them in at times down the stretch. And you just asked too much of that defense.
But Chan Gailey served a purpose, right? Because you had a first-time head coach. Gailey has tons of experience. He's been a head man before. Now it's just like, hey, Chan, you're like 75 years old, my man. Maybe even more. I
think the Fitzpatrick thing also was the underlying connection too. Right? You have Fitzpatrick.
Job, whatever.
My offense. I know your offense.
We mentioned this the other day. They come out and go all in on Tua again. Fitzpatrick's now looking like, okay, where can I go next? On the flip side, Cesario takes over somewhat hot seat because his star quarterback is Mr. $40 million man. Wasn't so happy based on his tweet yesterday.
No, and like I said, this is a situation that there's a lot of heavy labor, if you want to be politically correct, to be done there. And how are you dealing with J.J. Watt? How are you dealing, with Fuller, who they want to keep, and Watson loves, and Brandon Cooks, who's like, if I get traded again, somebody trades me one more time for a draft pick. I don't want to hear about it. And we've mentioned they have a couple of contracts. What is he going to think of David Johnson's deal? What is he going to think of, Merciless's deal? There's 4 or 5 contracts there, that'll be very interesting. Now the Patriots tried, trading for, potentially Fuller. So is he a guy that, that they liked or what was his opinion, of that? Because when you walk in and you're at minus cap space and you're at way minus draft capital, really the only thing left at your disposal is trades. So you're left with kind of trades, and that's, to me, going to be a very interesting scenario to say, we're bringing you in, but if ownership or other decide that they will move on from a core player or a Hall of Fame, most well-known, most loved and appreciated player in the history of their franchise, and you are the GM, be prepared not to be able to go to the grocery store without catching flack, because I can tell you firsthand, don't be the one who has to be on record as the guy that got rid of the fans' favorite player.
I do think Cal McNair has come out and said to like season ticket holders that JJ Watt would be back for whatever that's worth. But you have to wonder after that, what a bold move. Like, I guess when you're making $40 million a year, you can send out a tweet when the new GM gets hired, like, some things never change around here. Like, clearly not endorsing that hire.
Well, and then, like I said, they're not going to have a good day. The main reason I picked Houston on Sunday was I thought they would give the Titans every last bit of juice they had because they wanted to win that game for Romeo Crennel.
Yeah.
And you can't underestimate the team's affinity for him as a person and then as their head coach, right? The next part is the defensive players really love Anthony Weaver and what happens with him, because the organization, not just Bill O'Brien, the organization has been a huge believer and supporter of them having developed Anthony Weaver from acquiring him as a free agent to playing for them to going into the coaching side and moving all the way up to now being their D coordinator. So that's a very interesting scenario in there, because you're talking about changing culture, but you are ripping the roots out of that whole building. And sometimes, I'm not saying it's wrong, because sometimes, unfortunately, you're going to lose some good people with, the changes you make. But don't forget, this is also an organization in the past year that fired a 20-plus year front office football woman from the team with little or no explanation, and then doubled down and fired the public relations, there's some things being done there that aren't always on the up and up, in just terms of would not seem like common sense is always being used.
And you're bringing in Nick Cesario now, a guy that basically created the culture in which Bill O'Brien originated from. So, to Deshaun Watson's tweet or his point, it ain't changing much down there in Houston, is it? Hey, this is the state of football. We change it up each and every day. Sometimes we're draft, sometimes we're college, sometimes we're pro. You heard Coach Keith Grabowski. Sometimes we're giving back to the community. Shout out to our chat room people. Great to see Brian Beasley again. G Moneyman with the question. Appreciate the love and support. Thank you for the positivity, G Moneyman. He wants to know, John, who should the Washington football team draft? It's been 28 years since a competent quarterback. Well, who is the competent quarterback? I mean, I guess, if you win a Super Bowl, who's the last? They won, 4 Super Bowls with 4 different quarterbacks. Was Doug Williams the last one? And was there a good quarterback in Washington since then?
Well, wasn't he Schuler?
Gus Frerotte. I will say this. I think where the Redskins could potentially be picking, it almost is like a perfect storm with the Zach Wilson marriage. You got a guy in Alex Smith who already groomed 2 mobile quarterbacks, right? Colin Kaepernick and Patrick Mahomes, 2 guys that can move around and throw it, kind of like what Zach Wilson does. To me, that seems like an ideal landing spot. Clearly, Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields will be off the board by then. It's who do you like after that? I'm not a big Trey Lance guy. Kyle Trask and Mac Jones, too rich for me in the first round. So for me, Zach Wilson would be the guy if I'm the Washington football team in terms of looking for my next good quarterback. He mentions 28 years ago. That would be 1992. I'll go back and look that up while you give your take, John.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were going to want Zach Wilson, they would be anteing up again. And who knows, by then, it's also interesting to see who does the Washington football team pick to co-author these next steps with the roster with Ron Rivera. Is it as easy as Marty Herney or someone connected to the Panthers, or is there someone outside of that that they might look at, to work that job. So I think that'll be the interesting part. To me, if you're in the lower, where they're at now by winning the division, you didn't pull an Eagles, and work your way into the higher part of the draft. I think trade, it would have to be a trade up to get Zach Wilson. You might be in the position where you have to start looking at Trey Lance or a Mac Jones in the 20s, or potentially even slide back if you felt that was too rich for your blood. But you wouldn't mind taking him with a first-round pick if he's a guy that you give that grade to because you get that option year, which, is very important to NFL teams when it comes to quarterbacks. The good news is there are at least some options this year. You do have at least a couple of names, to kind of bandy around. And I think that, it would not be shocking to see the Redskins go right back into that quarterback market, should they so deem that to be their thing. And I think the other part is you've seen Daniel Snyder, and they've swung for the fences and missed a lot of times. But he does seem to also be the guy that says resources be damned if he wants to do something. So if the New York Jets decide Sam Darnold is my guy and want to trade that number 2 pick, the Washington Redskins will probably be one of the teams at least making a phone call.
Unbelievable. I don't know what Ron Rivera feels about Cam Newton, but I think probably for like under $15 million, you could probably sign Cam, Jameis Winston, and Josh Rosen. At this point, just bring all 3 of them in. Bring all 3 of them in. Let them compete for the job. The bottom line here is no matter who they draft, since it's not 1 or 2, whoever they draft, it's still going to be a couple years until, you're still starting the season with Alex Smith as your starter. And G Money Man went all the way back to 1991 on us, back to through the time machine, where Mark Rippon led the Skins to that 14-2 record. I guess, was that a Super Bowl year in 91? No, that was – did they beat the 91? Was that the Cowboys were 91? No, Cowboys were 92 and 93.
Yeah, that might have been right before the Cowboys.
Anyway, it threw for 28 touchdowns and 11 interceptions that year. Then went down to Tubesville after that. But, I guess I didn't realize it's been that long since a competent starting quarterback. RG3 had a pretty good 8-game stretch his rookie season until he got injured. But
he had a hell of a season opener against the Saints. I know that.
Hey, it's the state of football here. John Murphy, Ric Serritella breaking it down weekdays. The sun is really changing on us here. I don't know what's going on with the 2021 calendar year, if they just want to shine the spotlight on the NFLDraftBible.com. Did you sign up for the Baldy Breakdown seminar yet? Tonight, 9 p.m. Eastern, Darrell Rivas, Stephon Gilmore, Charles Woodson. Oh, by the way, did you see my power rankings, John, for the NFL Hall of Fame?
I did see that.
So to me, and they announced, if we're caught up, and I guess we'll touch base on Devonta Smith and wrap things up. But the NFL announced its semifinalists. To me, now that I think about it and look at the list, like for me, I don't even have to think about Charles Woodson, Peyton Manning, even Megatron. I really don't think twice about it. And then, one guy we haven't discussed that kind of fell through the cracks, Alan Faneca. I mean, this is a guy, a 6-time All-Pro. I think out of all the finalists, he probably has more All-Pros than any of them. 9-time Pro Bowler, 6-time All-Pro, a staple for the Steelers for over a decade. And honestly, he went on with the Cardinals during the later stages of his career and was still one of the best in the league. If Alan Faneca is not a Hall of Famer, tell me what guards are. But I think Faneca, those are my 4 guys. I think Zach Thomas and Jared Allen are kind of knocking on the door, and they'll eventually get in. But my cutoff here for this class is 4.
Yeah, I mean, I think you would expect, though, that they go the full on, right? They can go to 5, right?
5, yeah.
I think there's enough meat in that group to get a fifth name, in there if you want.
How about Richard Seymour?
Because there is a version like there, and that's what I'm saying. Like you have Bazzelli if you want to go that way. You have Faneca if you want to go that way. You might have Reggie Wayne over Torrey Holt by just a tad. I mean, any one of those other three DBs for different reasons. I would say Barber probably over Lynch and Butler. Yeah, and then I could definitely see the Seymour thing to me. And it's not just because of seeing him as a player, but then meeting him as a person, and seeing how he lived his life in the second half of after a great playing career. I was kind of surprised Sam Mills isn't already in there.
Yeah, I went back
in terms of production. And I know they didn't win, and every one of those four guys was at one time or another. Vaughn Johnson had his season. Sam Mills had his consistently. That then Swilling, had his. Everybody made their mark in that group. But I think what you then saw, with the Panthers, and then what you saw as a coach, maybe to me it's as an all around, contributor. It's tough for me to think that he has to wait just to be, put in by, a senior, type, award, in the future. So I could make that case.
I think with Mills, like he never was an All-Pro in 12 seasons. I think that's what kind of bothers people. Like, and I'm just guessing, like with the committee. Like they say, hey, the guy's never been an All-Pro. But you look, and I mean, he had 100 tackles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years. And then the other years that he didn't, 92, 95, 85, 99. I mean, he finished with over 1,200 tackles, which, that's pretty incredible. 22 forced fumbles, 23 fumble recoveries, 11 interceptions. And you mentioned Rondé Barber. He's another guy that created a lot of turnovers, right? He actually had 47 interceptions, 8 of them returned for touchdowns. We forget about that.
Yeah.
And then he forced 15 fumbles, recovered 12. But you forget Rondé Barber had so many of those big pick sixes, right? You forget about that kind of in a way. And then to me, like, because those run stuffing, defensive tackle, those nose tackles just don't exist like that in the NFL. But Richard Seymour was the anchor of a team. He's got 3 rings.
Mm-hmm.
And, there's something to be said for that. So you could state a case. And Leroy Butler, I mean, I was surprised. There's a guy, 4 straight All-Pros, 4 straight Pro Bowls, 4 straight All-Pros, and a championship. Right on the Brett Favre squad. So, I mean, I think you could state a case. Are you in agreement with me on Faneca though? Are you putting?
I think you could make judging recently, he's as good as the guys interior lineman guys that they've put. Now, I would say it would not be shocking to me if Manning Woodson are kind of 100% for me.
Oh, yeah.
I could have a conversation for a year on either Allen or Calvin Johnson. I'm good if you want to do it right away. I could have a conversation.
Are you in agreement with Calvin Johnson over Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt?
Yes. Yeah, because I thought when they were playing
on the defense side, do you like
when they were all playing? To me, that's why he was called Megatron. In other words, you have a nickname. Reggie Wayne is Reggie Wayne. Torrey Holt is Torrey Holt. The other guy is not even called by his name. So yeah, there's a level difference there. Literally, he leveled up because he was called Megatron.
What about on the defensive side? If you had to pick one, Zach Thomas or Jared Allen, two guys, lengthy careers, impact players, never really was on a winning, consistent winning team, but showed up year in, year out, great production. You could state a case they're both kind of compilers, right? Because Zach Thomas, you could state a case like you could say, hey, for like 1 or 2 seasons, maybe 3 years, Zach Thomas, you could argue, was one of the best at his position. Same thing with Jared Allen. I think he led the league in sacks a couple seasons. Like, you could say there was a handful of seasons Jared Allen was probably the top pass rusher in the league, even if it was 1 or 2 seasons. You could say that. Tony Boselli, I guess you could say, and I'm all for pushing the agenda that you've never had a Jacksonville Jaguar Hall of Famer, right? Like, yeah. If there's going to be one, there's a guy, number 1 overall pick, and lived up to the hype. It just was forgotten about down there. I mean, like,
and then he played, what, 8 years?
I think, yeah, just about 10. Boselli played, yeah, you're right. He only played 7 seasons. And he had 5 Pro Bowls and 3 All-Pros.
Yeah, so his is
90 games started.
Yeah, so his is the, the high rate of consistency, short period of time, gets dinged, and that's, that was that. So I could see him or Faneca, kind of making their, kind of a U-turn in there as the 4th guy. I think the one other thing is, I hope there is at least one wide receiver in this class. And it should be a guy that should already be in there. And that is Mr. Drew Pearson.
Drew Pearson's up. Yeah, he's on the but so Hines Ward didn't even make the semifinalist.
No, so he would not have obviously didn't make this list, which again, like Hines Ward versus Torrey Holt and Reggie Wayne, it's in the conversation.
Yeah. I kind of side with Ward there.
But it does show you, like we mentioned one other time, when we had guests on talking about the Hall of Fame, you can make a case.
Yeah.
Torrey Holt's on there, and my guy at wide receiver, has equal or better numbers. Henry Ellard.
Yeah, I mean, and you had Art Monk, Henry Ellard, and Gary Clark. And I wonder, because of that, if it hurts him at all, But he was, and then he was over with the Rams with Flipper Anderson.
Yep.
Jimmy Everett throwing him the ball. Drew Pearson. So, obviously 14-game seasons back then. He had very consistent career. But you go down the list, all right, rookie year, 388, then he goes for 1,000, 822, 806, leads the league with 870 receiving yards, 714, then he goes for 1,000, 568, 614, 382, 545. He finishes with 7,800 receiving yards and 48 touchdowns. Different era, average 16 yards per catch. And that's where, when you got to compare different generations, like, because they threw it a little bit more during Henry Ellard's time, but not a whole heck of a lot more. But they did play 16 games. Henry Ellard, you look at Henry Ellard from 88 to 96, which is almost a 10-year stretch. He goes for 1,400, 1,400, 1,300, 1,000, 700, 1,000, 1,400, 1,000, 1,000.
Yeah.
And he averaged 17 yards per catch.
So what did he finished? So yeah, and to me here, the numbers are numbers, in terms of stat and other. But last year in a similar scenario, Carmichael makes the Hall of Fame in the class of 2020. Has probably about 9,000. I think he's at about 9,000 yards and 75 touchdowns, roughly.
Yep. 9,000 yards and 80 touchdowns, 79 touchdowns. Yep.
Okay. But in the all-decade team that the NFL produced, Drew Pearson is on the all-decade team, and Harold Carmichael made the Hall of Fame a year before Drew Pearson. Come on now. So I get it. I understand it.
Numbers are very close.
But I'm going to say I think he might be one of the only remaining people that is on that all-decade. I mean, and you think about who played in that era. The all-decade team of the 70s is like a holy, bunch of guys. But he's one of the few remaining. And you look at the number of championships won and the success of their team. I think I'm not saying it's long overdue. It's due. And I think you could make that case with him. I would say Jared Allen, and then the Megatron Jared Allen. If you want to do both, you don't need my, you don't need me to bless that. But I'm not saying that that's crazy to put those four guys in. But to me, Manning and Woodson, are the for sure, 1, 2 of that class, and then those other guys are 3, 4, and then to me. Jared Allen with one of those O linemen, or Jared Allen with the DB. Those guys would be kind of 4 or 5. And so to me, the 1, 2 are for sure. I'd go Megatron as the 3, and then, the 4 or 5 guys together would be Allen Faneca, or, Jared Allen and Faneca, or, a Jared Allen and a DB.
Well, for whatever it's worth, Faneca has 6 all-pro selections. Nobody on this list is even close. Probably Peyton Manning is probably close. But, I mean, other than that, he clearly was the best at his position year in and year out. I don't know how many of these other guys can say. I was surprised Clay Matthews Jr., for the first time ever, made it to the semifinalist round. And I'm surprised he got and it's a compiler vote, right? He played 20 years, but never made an all-pro. Had 4 Pro Bowl seasons, right? Between 85 and 89, where he was at the top of his game. And 85, he had 126 tackles, 12 sacks. So he finished with like 1,600 tackles and 70 sacks. But he did it over 20 years on losing teams, and I think that hurts him too. Like, from 78 to 93, he was stuck on the Browns, and then he finishes out with the Falcons in the early 90s. Not exactly playing for some world beaters there.
Well, I think down the road,
only 11 playoff games. In 20 years, he played in 11 playoff games.
No, but that's the thing. You look at, Johnson, right? Plays 9 years in Detroit.
Yeah.
How many playoff games did he play in?
Well, I think it's just the way, like, you had never really seen a combination. Like, he was literally like Voltron, like the size, the speed, like, because back then, what year did he come out? I forget, but guys that were like 6'5" and running 4.4 40s was unheard of at the time, and it still is really. The size, the weight, the speed. I think that's what kind of separated Calvin. How about this comparison? And we'll end the show with this. Devontae Smith becomes the first Heisman Trophy winner since Desmond Howard. Who do you predict will have a better pro career? Desmond Howard, not really that productive, but obviously that big return in the Super Bowl earns a lot of cachet.
Whew.
Will Devontae Smith have a greater or less impact at the pro level than a Desmond Howard?
I mean, I think in today's game, Desmond Howard would say, boy, if I got drafted now, like if I got to play in this, era of NFL football, I might have had a better career. So I think that guys like Devonta Smith, have a better chance now, right? You look at him, you look at Waddle. You look at Hollywood Brown. People would not have drafted those slider receivers all the time as early and now also given them those opportunities, to be that guy. When you look around and you would say Devonta Smith would be probably underwhelmed if you told him he would have a career like T.Y. Hilton. But is that good enough? Is that a good enough career, to have? So I think you see a lot of guys that mirror or close to that skill set that he has shown, at the college level, to think that, man, there are some guys that have played that way. I mean, and how much bigger of a body type did Marvin Harrison have? He is a small dude, and stuff. And then I love the factor that you all of a sudden, he has the best nickname now in recent times. So I don't think you can beat that. The Slim Reaper is as good a cute little nickname as you could come up with. So I thought that was a pretty funny little anecdote to come out of last night, with that. And the other thing, you really know how good of a player and how good of a kid he is. That sounds as close to Nick Saban gushing about a player as you can get, is the stuff that Nick Saban was saying about him, quoted after, being named the Heisman Trophy winner. I put the Heisman Trophy, and then I put the quotes that Nick Saban said about him if I were Devonta Smith right next to it, because you don't get that much out of it.
Let me ask you this then. Are you now considering Smith over Chase in the draft?
No, I think it really is going to depend on what you're planning and how you're planning to use him. I think after you just saw what Justin Jefferson did, it's certainly going to make, Jamar Chase have a lot of positives, to him and people thinking about him in a very positive way. I think the only question I have for Jamar Chase, and it's not one that he needs to answer to me, maybe he'll need to answer it for the 32 NFL teams, is there's a little question around, downtown there about why the opt-out, what went on, maybe was there some things that were going on with everything that was going on in the world? Was it COVID related? Was it protection of the draft status? Or was there a little, maybe, kind of rough edges around some of the ways and some of the things that you saw? You saw Nick Saban, you got to give him credit, not only as a coach, but as a communicator and as a guy that knows the pulse of his room, right? Who was out in front marching with his players? Nick Saban. There may have been some quietness around some other campuses, and did that lead to, somebody saying, well, like, hey, if maybe I just want to take my time off and pay attention to other things. So, to me, that the question of why and if there was anything behind, if there's any little smoke there of why he, decided not to return. But I don't think he's overtaken Jamar Chase. I think if you are looking for that variable, you could take Devonta Smith over Jamar Chase after this season and the film he put up, and there's no questions asked for me, in that time frame. But it would come down to, what do you want? What are you looking for? If you want the size and a guy that can go get it, and if you want a guy that you could potentially use in a number of different ways, especially how creatively people can get a guy the ball, in this day and age, Devonta Smith clearly fits that role, perfectly.
And for those of you at home wondering, Desmond Howard, 1,600 receiving yards for his career. But check this out, 3,000 yards punt returns and eight punt returns for a touchdown, and then 8,000 kick return yards. So, he winds up, I mean, when you tally it all up, he's got over 13,000 career yards when it's all said and done. If Devontae Smith comes anything close to that, well, then he'll be well worth a first-round pick. All right, we didn't get to the all-decade teams. We'll try to squeeze it in. Tomorrow we'll have David Turner along with Neil Stratton and Dane Vandernat. And then Friday's a Football Friday edition. DT times 2 along with Big Law Lawrence Johnson. Of course, tonight, the Baldy Breakdown Seminar Corner back edition. If you want to, break it down like Baldy, you heard Coach Grabowski tell you, I mean, these are really, really exciting things if you're into X's and O's. That's NFLDraftBible.com. All right, parting shots. What do you want to tell the people here today on part 113 of the State of Football here, Wednesday, January 6, 2021, Johnny?
Well, I think anybody who's a football fan probably has their guy, and we just talked about the Hall of Fame, probably has their guy that they say, well, where is he? Could be, that was my favorite player. You can make, cases for all, a lot of the guys that we just talked about. I got one, so here's his case for the day. Lester Hayes is not in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. And if you're going to be putting Carmichael and Drew Pearson and these other guys who he covered into the Hall of Fame, how that guy is not in the Hall of Fame is kind of beyond me. He was the original swagged out DB in terms of how he played in the 70s and 80s. He's on the all-decade team, 40 picks, and to me, he was the glue, no pun intended, for all the stickum they used back in that time frame, but he was the glue to that defense. And I remember him and Michael Haynes being the original two guys that a team put together to have literally two of the three best corners in the league at that time frame on the same roster. 6'2", 200-pound cover corner. Not surprising that he played for the Raiders in that time frame. And amazingly, a 5th-round pick out of Texas A&M. So it wasn't a first-round pick that turned out to have a career like that. But go look at 2-time Super Bowl champ, 5-time Pro Bowler, all-decade team, 39 career picks, 4 return to the house. Go watch the Super Bowl against the Redskins, one-on-one on Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown was playing with Lucy and Snoopy the rest of that game because he certainly wasn't a part of the offense for the Redskins in that Super Bowl. To me, that's a guy not only underrated in terms of for the performance he had for his career, but you start stacking those numbers, and I would tell you that if you got Rondé Barber and Leroy Butler and John Lynch in the finalists, I'm very surprised that he's not already in. And now I'm hopeful that a Drew Pearson and Harold Carmichael from that era got in with a senior committee, and Tom Flores is right on the doorstep there. David Turner would say, not surprising that I have a former Raider as a guy that from that era. But go back and look, and you want to see a guy wearing a cockeyed number 37 out there covering guys, go back and do some research and come back and tell me Lester Hayes might be thought of in a little different capacity if you go back and start reading, his bio and looking at the numbers he put up.
Yeah, definitely well worthy case there. Is Steve Atwater in the Hall of Fame? Did they just put him in? Because I mean,
he was a recent. Yeah,
I think he just got in because you could state a case like Dennis Smith. Like, to me, I don't think anybody from that Orange Crush defense, like the Denver Super Bowl, like the 3 Super Bowls that they lost, like Atwater was on maybe some of them, but not all of them. He came towards the later on. But you could argue Dennis Smith was the greater player than Steve Atwater. And for that, you could also state a case like Carl Mecklenburg. I was a big fan of Simon Fletcher, borderline Hall of Famer. Go check out the numbers there. So, I didn't come handy with my under the radar dark horse Canada, but just a couple guys that came to mind staying in the division there in the AFC West. But, it's been another hour of power We'll be back at it again tomorrow on the State of Football, your new home for real football talks in the morning. Weekdays, 9 a.m. Eastern. Shout out to all our chat room people, Brian Beasley, G Money Man.
One day closer to playoff picks.
Yeah, well, we will have playoff picks indeed. And